Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be wrapping up my month of January, and January was a very interesting month. It has both at the same time felt extremely long and extremely short, but overall it was a very good reading month. I'm going to come in at about 23 to 2400 pages read, which is really good for me. But we started out the month very strong. Let's go ahead and just jump right into it. And the first book was Foster by Clara Keegan. And this was my first Clara Keegan experience, and I ended up giving this one a 4-star rating. Now, this is a short story that really just kind of deals with a child being taken to a foster family for a period of time. I forget exactly what it is off the top of my head, but it is a really touching story that just kind of shows the different kinds of care that a child needs, and just also it shows how adults can be affected by tragic things that have also happened in their life. This was a very touching and heartwarming tale, and it is definitely something that has made me want to read more from Clara Keegan, and it is something that I'm definitely going to do. I have heard some other good things about some of her other writing, and so I'm looking forward to diving in onto that. But yeah, like I said, just short. It was a great way to kind of move from Wind and Truth that I finished in December and go into the new year. Very nice kind of, I don't want to call it a palate cleanser, but it kind of reset the mental after Wind and Truth, and I definitely had a really good time with it and looking forward to it. And I hope you get the reference on my nice little self-made cover there. Next up in the month of January, I continued on my streak of some very short books, and this is a popular movie. There's a couple different adaptations of this. So there's a movie with Tom Cruise, Edge of Tomorrow. There's also a manga, and that would be, like I said, Edge of Tomorrow, also known as All You Need Is Kill. And this is by Hiroshi Sakarakara, I'm going to go with, and I ended up giving this one a 3-star rating. The reason for that being, I think the second half of that story really fell off. I think there are some really imaginative things that go on in here. I think the whole time loop idea is done so brilliantly well. And just to give you an idea, the first third or so of this book, I was trending on this being like a 5-star. I was really digging it. I think the combat that happens in it was really imaginative, and if you read this, you could almost think that some of it is lazy writing because the same things are happening. So the writer is writing the same things over and over again, but it just is a mechanic in this book that I think worked really well, and I was really glad to see. There's some stuff that happens later on, and it gets a little romancy and some stuff, and I think it kind of loses the direction that it started with. But in the end, I think it's very fascinating. There's some really cool sci-fi stuff that happens in here, and I actually think after reading the book, I would really like to read the manga because I think this is a very visual story. I don't always picture all of my stories right in my head. I know plenty of people who, kind of picture themselves everywhere all the time when they read. And for me, it's more of a hit and miss thing. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. And this is a story that I definitely felt that. And so I think reading the manga and actually having the visual there would be a pretty cool experience. That might be something that I end up doing at some point. I do like to read manga, so I think that might be a good one to do. But like I said, I ended up giving that one a 3-star just for some of the stuff that happened later in the books there. But then we get to talk about an all-time new favorite book for me. And this is a book, I'm going to do a full dedicated video for it here soon, but this is a book that I want everybody to read. And I don't even think it's because everyone will like it. I think this is going to be a very divisive book. And actually, Goodreads isn't the end-all be-all for a book, but the fact that this one is sitting like under a 4-star rating, getting closer to like a 3.5-star, I think illustrates that like there are people like me who absolutely love this book, and then there are people who are extremely frustrated by it. And that would be We Used to Live Here by Marcus Kilwer is how I'm going to say it. So this was obviously a 5-star rating for me. This, like I said, is an all-time new favorite book for me. This is a psychological horror thriller mystery, and it just was on the razor's edge of being a book that I would love or hate. And it just rode that fine line all the way through. I was riveted the whole time I read this book. There were moments when I was reading this book where I was frightened. I was home alone and I would like catch a glimpse of myself in the mirror. I was listening to this on audio, and I would walk by the bathroom and like catch a glimpse of myself in the mirror and be like freaked out and have to make sure there wasn't, some kind of horrific thing following me. I think this is a really interesting book that looks at the idea of your consciousness and like, can you trust your own thoughts? Can you trust your brain? Can you be tricked into thinking things that aren't actually happening? And I just think the atmosphere and the terror and the horror that are in this book are just next level fantastic, and I absolutely loved this book. I actually had a friend read it, and it also terrified him, and he was like, I don't know if I'm just being a coward or if this is just that scary, and for me it was, and it was just great. I read some of this book late at night in the bed with all the lights off and everything, because like I said, I'm listening to it, and there were times where I'm like, I don't know if I can go to bed now because I'm like scared, and which is a crazy thing. Like I'm not the kind of person who's normally scared about things, but it's the type of horror this is, right? This isn't like a slasher horror murder kind of thing where somebody's coming at you and it's like a person or something like that. And it's not, it just, it has so many aspects of the psychological aspects to it that just work so well for me. And like I said, I'm begging you to read this book, and I'm not even going to, I like more than half of you probably are not going to like this book and definitely not like it as much as me, but I would love to talk to people about this book. I want to, like, when I finished this book, I started looking at why people didn't like it, why people liked it. I just wanted to hear what people thought because I just was so riveted by this experience. And so once again, We Used to Live Here, absolutely an amazing book. And it is going to be the book of the month. I'm just going to go ahead and spoil that here because, you know, I did read some other good stuff this month, but I'll be honest, that book, something special. It is a book that this doesn't ever happen for me actually, but as soon as I finished the book, I thought about restarting it. Like right away, I was like, I want to reread this, which is not so, like, I do not reread books. And the temptation to reread that book, I'm still thinking about it now. And I have a feeling that I'm going to be thinking about it for quite a while. Now, with all that being said, whatever I read next was going to have a hard time living up to We Used to Live Here, an all-time new favorite book. And I can happily say that Before the Reckoning, The Blood Rebellion by fellow booktuber Chance Dillon did hold up. It was a good time. This is a short story. It's available for free on his, it is Patreon? I can't remember if it's Patreon or Substack. I'm pretty sure it's Patreon, but you can go over to his channel, check it out, read it. It's good. I didn't give it a rating because it's short, right? And I feel like with a short story, sometimes it's hard or not fair to really like give it a full ranking, especially with how short this one is. But I will say it was good. And what it did do is it made me very excited to read his book that is coming out later this year. And so I don't know what else you can ask for a free short story that's available like that. Like I'm excited to read his book when it comes out. And so I think, and that's following up one of the best books I've ever read, right? And so I think it would have been, sometimes when you read something that's so good, it's easy to put down whatever you read next. And that's not what happened. So I hope that is good enough praise for you to at least want to go check out what he has going on over there. Because like I said, it is good. And I think he's got a very interesting world. This is obviously something that he has dedicated a lot of time and effort into. And he is really like putting everything you want into a book. You know, from an author perspective, like he's doing the right thing. So once again, definitely go check that out from him. Then after that, I went ahead and jumped into Starship Trooper by Robert Heinlein. If you have been watching my channel for, you know, a extended period of time, you have known that that book was on my TBR for about 8 straight months, and I kept pushing it off and, you know, never got around to it. And so I made it a goal to finally get to it here in the first month of 2025 and not push it down the ladder anymore. And I am so glad that I did, so that it can be off the list. Now, I didn't overly enjoy this book. I ended up giving it a 3-star rating. And I will say there are some really interesting things that are in this book, but there's a lot of not interesting stuff that happens. There's a lot of political commentary that comes in pretty heavy-handed, and I didn't, not even if you agree with it or disagree with it, but I feel like sometimes that kind of commentary, when it's so heavy-handed, it can be a little draining to read, right? Like I don't, you know, some of that will depend on why you're reading. I mostly read for enjoyment, to kind of, you know, get away from the real world. I want to go somewhere else, right? And while some of that does happen, especially earlier in the book, this book really dragged for me in the second half. And, you know, it's one of those things where it's like the sci-fi aspects of it, I think, are amazing. There's some really interesting stuff here. And then some of the political commentary, I'm just not reading for that. And so I think if you are interested, even if whether or not you agree or disagree with like some of the political things that he's talking about, if you're somebody who likes to kind of examine those things from an author, this might be something that works a little bit more for you. But I went into this for like the sci-fi aspect of it, the like questioning of society moving forward and like this weird world with this war going on and all of these things. And I didn't get enough of those elements that I wanted, which was a little bit of a disappointment. But you know, it's one of those books that I am glad I read. I liked it overall. Like, it's not a bad book by any means. I feel like I'm very negative on it, but I'm not. I liked it. It's something that you know, I could recommend to the correct person, not for everybody. I can see why it won awards and everything, but yeah, it's an interesting one, but I'm glad it's a book that I have under my belt. And this is up next is an author that I am glad I can finally say that I read, even though I don't think that this book was the best introduction or her best foot forward for me, and that would be The Wood at Midwinter, and I finally kind of got it right, even though I had to stop. And that is by Susanna Clarke. I have said multiple times that I do not think her stories are going to be ones for me, and unfortunately this one was not. I ended up giving this one a 2-star rating, but I will say that I don't think that's really fair or indicative of her as a writer or how I might feel about some of her other works. From my understanding is this story was originally like a radio play kind of thing that happened, and then they took it into a print version and made this story, right? I will say that I think the artwork, that this is an illustrated kind of thing that happens. I really enjoyed the art. I think that this is a picture book. I would have enjoyed more than actually having the words in it, which is a weird thing to say, but I'm not the only one who felt like that. I've talked with a few people who they kind of, feel the same way I did about it. The art is great, but the story is just nothing, right? Like nothing happens. It is very whimsical and fairy tale-esque. Like it is a fairy tale, modern, like kind of interpretation of a fairy tale. And so I'm sure there are people who are absolutely going to really enjoy that and be like, this is the greatest thing ever. But it's just one of those things that didn't work for me, and that is okay. I'm still kind of on my train of I don't think she's an author for me, and I probably won't read her other books. But I always say I want somebody to convince me to, because this is a feeling that I have had, and I haven't had anybody really sell me on Piranesi or Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. Is that what it is? Something like that. So, if you are a huge Susanna Clarke fan, let me know why I should read those. But speaking of being a big fan, the next thing I read is actually a comic book, and I am a big Superman fan. And so I read Superman for All Seasons. I gave this a 5-star. My rating for comics and manga is a little bit different than I do for my novels. It's not nearly as strict, or like I don't give out a lot of 5 stars, but comics and manga, I kind of, I don't know, I'm a little bit lighter on those. But I will say, I absolutely love this story. I think for me, there are a couple of different kinds of Superman, right? There's the older, confident Clark Kent kind of Superman where he's kind of got his place figured out in the world and all those things. This is a much younger Superman. This is still a Superman that is finding his place in his world. Do people accept him? Can he accept himself? How can he save the most people? How can he do more? And that's something that really resonated with me in the story, was the idea of, he has all this power. He's Superman, right? But he still can't do everything by himself. He still can't take care of everything. And I think that's an important thing for people in general to like figure out, that there's like a line of how much can you do for others? How much can you do for yourself? And like, what are the limits there? What can you actually do? And I don't know, that it was a story that just really resonated with me, really worked out. And I really loved that story. If you are not somebody who has read a lot of comics, this is definitely something that I would highly recommend. I think it's a really good time. And even if you're not a Superman fan, I know a lot of people don't like Superman because they think he's overpowered, or like, if he has all this power, why is he always the good guy? Why would somebody just do this out of the kindness of their heart? Which I think maybe gives us a look into society itself of like, well, why don't you just want to be that kind of person? But some of those questions are asked and answered, and I don't know. There was so much in this Superman story that I really liked. And so, like I said, if you are not a comics person, but you kind of want to try some, or you're not a big Superman fan and you kind of want to see maybe why somebody who is a Superman fan is, this is something I'm going to point a lot of people to. And yeah, I'm very glad I read it. Thank you to Nick over at Another BookTube channel for shouting that out in his top 10 comics and graphic novels of the year. I think that's what his video was. That's where I saw it. So yeah, like I said, great time. The art is okay. I don't love all of the art in it, especially the way Superman is drawn. Random nitpick, but like I said, in general, very, very good story. And then that brings me to the last book I will end up finishing here in January. And technically I have not finished it yet as of recording this video, but I will before the month is over, so I'm going to include it here. And that is The Blackest Heart by Brian Lee Durfee. This is the second book in the 5 Warrior Angels trilogy, and I am going to probably end up giving that one a 4-star rating. I'm really enjoying my time with it. I will say this book is a little bit slower. The first part of the book, takes some time to get going. We're doing a lot of things. There's a lot of characters. We're kind of, big things happen in these books. So there's kind of some reshuffling of who's doing what, where are we going, what's happening. And it's really kind of picked up here in the last third or so of the book, and I'm really enjoying it. I find the Five Isles to be a very interesting place. I think there are some really cool things that he's doing, like scary mermaids, I think are really cool. Like there's just a lot of like dark, sinister stuff that's happening in here, but still some of those like hopeful things. There is some really cool stuff in like a dark, messed up way. This is not a spoiler for the book in any way, shape, or form, but there is a scene where somebody rips off a dead person's arm and then stabs somebody with the bone that is sticking out of the arm that they just ripped off of a dead body. And like, if that resonates with you, if that's something you like to see in like a dark, grimdark kind of story, like this series is for you. It is working very well for me, and some of those aspects are just great. There's a lot more going on. There's political intrigue and all those kinds of things still happening in here, but I'm very much enjoying my time with the 5 Warrior Angels trilogy, and I'm very much looking forward to finishing that out here sometime in 2025, and hopefully sooner than later, because like I said, this is probably going to end up being in my top 10 favorite series of all time. I'm really enjoying it, so that is really great. And speaking of top 10 series of all time, we have to talk about the last book that I was reading in January. I wanted to be at about the 50% mark of this book by the time January ended, and that did not even come close to happening. And that is not because of the book, that is because I was very, very busy in January. And that is The Fugitive Prince by Janie Wertz. And I actually only made it to 14% or so into this book, according to my Kindle. It's been great. I'm really enjoying it, but I read physically normally right before I go to bed, and I have just been so tired recently. When it's time for me to read, I barely read any, and then I just kind of go to sleep. So I'm hoping that I can still finish it in February. So we'll see what happens with that. So just to mention it again, my book of the month is We Used to Live Here by Marcus Kilwer, and let's go ahead and jump into manga, because one of my goals this year was to read a little bit more manga, at least be more steady with it, and that is definitely not what happened at all. But I will say I did read a little bit in Frennen Beyond Journey's End. Has been really great. I've only read 5 chapters, but those 5 chapters were some of the best manga I have read. Like it's so early to say this, and I said this in my weekly wrap up when I talked about it, but like if it even slightly continues on the trajectory that it is, this will be an all-time new favorite manga for me. It has been excellent. So we'll see what happens there. Like I said, I have barely scratched the surface with it. 5 chapters in. The first 2 or 3 chapters were longer. They were like 40 pages. So that would, normally one's like 15-ish pages. So you can see it's like I read a little bit more, even though it's only 5 chapters, but still very, very early into a story to say the things that I have said about it. But I'm very much enjoying that. I also read 5 chapters of Dragon Ball Super, and those are the 2 manga that I'm kind of focusing on here. As my main focus is when it comes to manga. I have some other series that I'll mention that I'm, reading here and there, bits and pieces, but these are the 2 that I'm kind of focusing on. I think Dragon Ball Super, I'm really continuing it because I just finished the first time I read Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, was recently. I grew up with the show or the anime and everything, and so I wanted to read it and go through. And now we're at Super, and so I have no idea. I haven't watched any of Super, so I have no idea what's going to happen. And it's been interesting. I have noticed some differences, specifically in the artwork and how it's a lot more busy, and it's not as crisp and clear as I was used to in Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, which is. We'll see. We'll see how I feel about that, because one thing I really praised about those earlier series was the art and how crisp and clean, and you could tell what's happening and everything. So we'll see how I feel about it. And I mean, if it's Dragon Ball with the same kind of humor and the same kind of silliness, but also that slight serious tone underlined in there, I'll end up enjoying it. I also read a little bit of Boruto. Sometimes I'm curious on why I'm still reading it. It's because I love Naruto so much, and so I'll continue to read it. It is better right now than it was for a little while. Still have problems with that series overall, so it's kind of one of those things. And then I'm also caught up on Black Clover, which is a series that I have liked. I wish I had enjoyed it more. And as we're closing in on the end, I kind of wish it would just wrap up. I feel like it's been really drawn out here at the end, and it's been, like I said, it's been good. It's been fine. It just never hit those like high marks that I really wanted from it, unfortunately. It went from having a more grim and dark tone that I think was the original plan, maybe, and it turned into a much more lighthearted fairy tale-esque kind of story with a like found family, power of friendship kind of stuff, which I don't want to say turned me off, because I do like those kinds of elements in some of these shonen, but I was hoping for something maybe a little more dark and gritty, and that's definitely not what happened there. I did not read any of Kaiju number 8, and I did not read any One Piece. I don't think there was any new Vinland Saga or Berserk for me to read, so those are some other series that I am reading and kind of dabbling in every now and again. But like I said, the main 2, Frennen and Dragon Ball Super, are going to be the focuses here for the foreseeable future, I guess, because I need to, I think they're both about 200 chapters. So it depends on how much I read, and we'll see how that goes. Very quickly, for what I have watched, I have been watching a lot of Reba, the early 2000s sitcom with Reba McEntire. It's fun. It's not like the best TV ever, but it does make me laugh. It's silly, and it's a nice snapshot, I feel, of like that time period. Like I think in the first season, like there's a TV they have in their kitchen or something, and it's like the same one I had growing up. So there's just like some things that, some nostalgia stuff in there, but I don't know, it's silly and fun. And then I just need to lament about my poor Pittsburgh Steelers one more time this month, now that they're finally knocked out of the playoffs. What a skid. What an awful skid to 5 straight losses in a row. Russ is not the guy. I don't think Justin Fields is either. I think we're going to sign Fields and see what happens from there. It doesn't look like any coaching staff changes are going to happen, which You know, I personally have never been a fan of Terrell Austin. I feel like he is basically just riding on the success of very talented players, but not really bringing anything. The fact that like a sub linebacker is end up covering the slot receiver as often as still happens today instead of like the nickel taking over, it absolutely blows my mind, and I just can't understand how I can see the mismatch from like 9,000 miles away, and somebody getting paid hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars doesn't see that and realize that that is a gross mismatch and cost us. But that is, you know. You know, I don't need to. This is a BookTube channel. We don't need to talk too much about the Steelers and just make me sad, right? So that is pretty much. I've also watched some Celebrity Jeopardy. Big fan of that, and I don't really think I've watched anything else. I haven't really had time for much else as far as that goes. So let's go ahead and talk about what happened on the channel this month. And so the first video I did was channel changes. So, you know, there were some changes I was going to make to the channel, not anything too crazy. I definitely in that video talk about how I'm not going to review every single book independently, and because of that I was going to start doing weekly updates, which I hope you have been enjoying. I'm kind of still trying to figure out exactly how long I like those, how much I want to talk and everything. So definitely let me know how you feel about those in the comments, because you know, feedback is always appreciated here. And so yeah, that was kind of like the biggest change. There's some other stuff that I talked about in that video, but the big thing is definitely the weekly updates. I made a 2025 goals video, which is, you know, I'm a kind of a goal-oriented person, and I think it helps when I like say some of those things. The one thing to note from there is I actually dropped my reading goal again this year. So I'm not so much worried about the quantity of books I read, going to really just make sure the quality is high. And I will say I'm the kind of person who always just reads what I want to read, so that wasn't really a problem in the past, but I do plan on reading some like bigger stuff this year, so I went ahead and dropped the number. Not that I care too much about it in general. I also put out my Wind and Truth review. Looking back on that, I think I would have done that one differently. That review I filmed like the morning after I finished the book the night before. And I think it would have been better if I had actually sat and really thought about stuff. And it's not that I didn't, I think, but you know, there's a different reaction you have, like emotions are high after finishing a book like that. I still think in general, I'm more positive than a lot of other people are on that book. I know that a lot of people seem to have a lot more problems with it than I do. And I don't know if that's just, I don't know what that is. You know, it's a book, right? People have different feelings on it. And yeah, I'm more positive in general on it. But I think if I could go back in time, I would maybe do a little bit more, like let it sit in more maybe. I don't know. Because even looking back, you know, I was in a great discussion with Jake. Oh, I'm going to forget somebody. It was Jake, Vera, Brian, and who I'm forgetting people. Oh, Alex from Iscadardia. I don't think I'm forgetting anybody else. I'm going to feel bad if I did, but I think that was everybody. And we talked about it. And in general, I still have the same feelings. Maybe a little bit more negative than like my peak right after finishing it. I was, you know, you're in that like great state after. And I think I'm maybe less positive on it, but I still think I would probably put it over Oathbringer and Rhythm of War for me. And like, but to me, it's nowhere close to The Way of Kings or Words of Radiance for me. But like, I don't know. I guess I'm still just a little bit more positive. But I think I maybe would have taken my time with some more reflection and done it slightly differently, but I don't know. In general, I'm still kind of happy with it because, like I said, my opinions haven't changed all that much. Then we looked at all of my reads from 2024 and which ones I would recommend, because there are definitely books that I absolutely love and give 5 stars to, but I would not recommend to the random person. I did my February TBR, so you can check that out if you want to know what I'm going to be reading. And then obviously I had weekly updates each week. So like I said, if you like those, don't like them, let me know. I'm kind of curious on how people are feeling about the weekly updates. I personally have enjoyed them. I think it's given me the opportunity to talk about books that otherwise I wouldn't talk about in the same amount of detail now that I'm not doing a review for every single thing that I read. Some other things that I did, like I said, I was in that chat with everybody for Wind and Truth. I was also on the Bearded Book Beast channel. We did a great discussion there. It was a great time. And I think that was the only one that I did. I hope I'm not forgetting. If I did, I'll mention it somewhere on the screen. I don't think I did anything else. Like I said, January was both very short and very, very long. But now let's go ahead and do the author shout out. And I have one author to shout out here. If you are an author or somebody who wants, you know, something like your book mentioned or anything, definitely you can feel free to reach out for me. I'm currently not accepting like arcs from anybody, but I'm always more than happy to shout out somebody's channel. And this is Sean Brink, Bound by Blood. And the quick synopsis here is: a demon cult and a Christian church battle for territory. Combat lines are drawn, angels and demons square off as brother goes against brother. The spoils of war are human souls. Who will rise victorious and at what cost? So you can go ahead and check that out. I will have a link for that down in the description, but definitely let me know how your month went. I'm very curious on if you had as good of a reading month as I did. Once again, I'm very happy with my reading. Anytime you can get a 5-star for me, new all-time favorite, I'm super happy. So, but yeah, definitely let me know down below in the comments. But remember, read what you want when you want.